What we learn in the schools is that when Franklin Roosevelt was elected, the New Deal came into being and saved the country from total collapse. In fact, Roosevelt's New Deal did take bold steps to alleviate the situation through Social Security, unemployment insurance, hiring millions of people to do useful work, and a minimum wage. But what is often overlooked in the history of this period is that Roosevelt was pushed and pressured into the New Deal reforms by a nation in rebellion.
Let's stick together! We can't win this strike if we don't stick together!
There were strikes all over the country demanding change. As has happened again and again in a nation's history, the government was only moved to reform by the actions of organized citizens. Here, Janora Dollinger tells of her experience in one of these sit-down strikes.
When you worked in the factory in those days, no one cared what your name was. They were wage slaves. They used to say, once you pass the gates of General Motors, forget about the United States Constitution. Workers had no rights when they entered that plant. If a foreman didn't like the way you parted your hair, or whatever he didn't like about you, he could fire you. No recourse. No nothing. Combined with the bad conditions on the outside, poor living conditions, lack of proper food, lack of proper medical attention, everything else, the auto workers came to the conclusion that there was no way they could ever escape any of this injustice without joining a union. We held meetings in garages and basements, secret meetings, so the people wouldn't get caught, beaten up. The workers were at the point where they had had enough. And they sat down. When the UAW leaders in the big Fisher Body Plant 1 heard about the sit-down in Fisher 2, they sat down also. That took real guts. And it took political leadership. The company decided that they had to break the strike. It was very cold. They turned off the heat in the building. Then the company police and the city police started shooting. Tear gas and bullets went over our heads into the crowds which had come to watch. The police were using rifles, buckshot, fire bombs, tear gas canisters. It was a shock to a lot of people. Workers overturned police cars to make barricades. They ran to pick up the fire bombs thrown at them and hurl them back at the police. The men wanted me to get out of the way. You know, the old protect the women and children business. I told them, get away from me. The lights went on in my head. I thought, I have never used a loudspeaker to address a large crowd of people, but I've got to tell them there are women down here. I called to them, cowards! Cowards! Shooting into the bellies of unarmed men and firing at the mothers of children. And then everything became quiet. I thought, the women can break this up. So I appealed to the women in the crowd. Break through those police lines and come down here and stand beside your husbands and your brothers and your uncles and your sweethearts. I could barely see one woman struggling to come forward. A cop had grabbed her by the back of her coat. She just pulled out of that coat and she started walking down to the battle zone. As soon as that happened, there were other women and men who followed. That was the end of the battle. When those spectators came into the center and the police retreated,